Okay, welcome. Today is the Historic Preservation Commission meeting of July 23rd, 2012 at 2 p.m. May we have roll call?
Commissioner Morgan?
Here.
Commissioner Tufankian is not here. Commissioner Vartanian?
Here.
Commissioner Vidor?
Here.
And Chairperson Shire.
Here. First on our agenda is just a notice that the posting of the agenda was made on or before Tuesday, July 17th, 2012 on the bulletin board outside City Hall. Number 3 on the minutes, or I'm sorry, on the agenda, approval of the minutes from June 25th, 2012. Were there any comments or corrections?
Yes. I just had a comment about item B on page 2 on the topic of me asking that we reactivate the mid-century multifamily residential apartment project. I also had added, and I don't know whether this was considered to be a comment, but I meant it to be that we would, in addition to reactivating this and finishing it, also add period apartments of all the different periods. So in other words, if they would be considered old enough to be potentially historic, that we would take a look at everything, not just the recent past.
Okay, when we go through that item, I'll address that also, even though it's not directly agendized. It totally relates to how we're going to deal with this. So.
Okay.
Any other comments or corrections? The only one I saw, I believe, page 3, 8B, Glendale Dodge car dealership. Should that be a spelling correction there?
Third line, unless we're in Venice.
I wasn't sure. That's all I had. Is there a motion then?
Motion to approve the minutes as amended.
I second.
Commissioner Morgan?
Yes.
Commissioner Vartanian?
I was not at the meeting, so I will abstain.
Commissioner Vidor?
Yes.
And Chairperson Shire.
Yes.
That's right.
Okay, next on the agenda, oral communications. This discussion is limited to items not part of this agenda. Each speaker is limited to 5 minutes, and the commission may question the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. So today we have one, and that is Greg Grammer. Want to come forward?
Thank you, Chairperson Shire, Commissioners, and members of staff. My name is Greg Grammer. I'm the president of the Glendale Historical Society, and just wanted to take a few minutes to tell you about some of our upcoming events. On Thursday, July 26th, that's this Thursday, the Glendale Historical Society is going to be sponsoring an event with the Associates of Brand Library called The Wonderful Magical World of Neon. It's a pictorial tour by Eric Linksweiler of the Museum of Neon Art. He's going to be showcasing some of the incredible neon signage that can be found in Glendale in Los Angeles. And if you've never been to one of his presentations or never been on one of the Museum of Neon Art's bus tours, I highly recommend it. You'll see a side of Los Angeles that you never knew existed. And then I also wanted to mention that we have our annual members meeting coming up on August 18th, and this year it's going to be held in the forecourt of the Alex Theater. This is going to be open to members and invited guests, so if you're not a member, please feel free to join. In addition to our annual board elections, we will also be handing out our 2012 Preservation Awards. And I'm pleased to announce that this year's recipients are all of the applicants and volunteers that are responsible for the establishment of our 4 historic districts, Royal Boulevard, Cottage Grove, Art Even Highlands, and our most recent addition, Rossmoyne. Other recipients include George Seeley Jr. For the rehabilitation of the historic Seeley's building, and the Armenian Consulate for their sensitive addition and good stewardship of the beautiful 1934 Spanish Colonial Revival brick building on Central Avenue that is now their home. That night we will also be featuring tours of the Alex Theater and discounts on our home tour. Speaking of which, we have our fall home tour coming up on September 30th. This year's tour is called Glendale's Golden Age, Distinctive Homes of the 1920s and 1930s. Again, it will take place on September 30th from 11 to 4 p.m. and will feature 5 period revival homes in a charming storybook cottage courtyard. We're going to be pleased to showcase the work of Ben Sherwood, who is known for designing the Snow White cottages in Los Feliz and also the Gray Sherwood house that was recently added to the Glendale Register. Tickets will go on sale on August 18th through the Glendale Arts website and at their box offices located at the Alex Theater, Glendale Community College, and the Americana. And more information can be found on our website at www.glendalehistorical.org. Thank you very much.
Can I ask you one question? What was the date again of the Brown Library Neon?
That is this Thursday, July 26th at 7 p.m. at the Glendale Central Library.
Thank you. Next agenda item, comments from commissioners.
Well, I'll have one. I just want to say how proud and excited I am about what happened in Rossmoyne over the last couple weeks, and thinking back to 2000 when I got involved in preservation, and how looking at preservation from that perspective, it seems so daunting. And I really feel like right now Glendale's in the golden age of preservation, like, really going strong. So I know both of you, and especially Lorna as the leader of the group, were very instrumental in making that happen. It's a very big district, and I know very labor-intensive to pull something like that together. So from the bottom of my heart, from all our hearts, thank you very much for the wonderful work you did. And I also want to extend a thanks. I just was asked to provide some information because I live in Adams Hill, on the Adams Hill gas station, that the Glendale Historical Society's Preservation Advocacy Committee is working on helping to put together nominations for the selected city-owned properties that have been deemed eligible for the Glendale Register. And I really want to thank the Historical Society very, very much for taking a leadership role in helping to put those applications together. That will do so much for the city to have these, important public and institutional landmarks designated. So thank you for your efforts. That's it.
Go ahead.
I just quickly want to thank the City Council for putting their final seal of approval on the Rossmoyne Historic District. And for anybody who doesn't know, we are now official. I have run into a couple of people in the neighborhood who just didn't read the paper or didn't see the council meeting last week. So, and thank you for the kind words. It's a very exciting time.
For the record, the zone change takes 30 days to become official after the hearing, so almost.
We're not quite
almost
official.
So close to official, you can go ahead and say it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, next on the agenda, do we want to do old business or switch the order today?
That might be nice since we have people in the
Okay.
audience.
And we're going to switch the order of 6 and 7 and take 7 new business first. So 7A, 1437 East Mountain Street. It's a Glendale Register nomination and Mills Act contract proposal.
Okay, we have 3 nominations today, and I'll cover 2, and Christina Park will cover the 3rd nomination. The first is the Spanish Colonial Revival House at 1437 East Mountain Street. It was designed and built in 1936. It was designed by Postle & Postle, who are a fairly well-known architectural firm. This was built after the father had kind of bowed out of the business, so this is the work of the son, David Postle, if I remember which is which correctly. So we're looking at the... Oh, I'm sorry, I have the wrong street number here. Ignore this, please. We'll just skip to another slide. Here we are. This is accurate, 1437 East Mountain. So this is right next to the Rossmoyne district, right across the street, and it falls into a kind of a zone between the Royal Boulevard district and the Rossmoyne district. If the Royal Boulevard district were ever to expand to cover the full development of that phase of Rossmoyne, this house and some of its neighbors could possibly be brought into that district. So we're looking at the house, and I may as well go back to this first picture, even though it's got the wrong address on it. You see the ascent from the street creates this kind of very dramatic entry. There was a pergola added to kind of enhance that in more recent years, but the bulk of the house dates to 1936. but there was a significant addition built onto the house in the 1980s. It's on the front of the house that I'll explain in a bit, but I'll just describe some of the features that we see today. When you get to the top of the stairs, you see the double arches of an entry porch, and the entry door is set in the plane where the historic entry door was located. Looking at some of the details on the facade, here's a picture of the entry porch. This window is more or less in its original configuration with the wood sill beneath. The entry door is a replacement door. And then a lot of nice kind of architectural details. This kind of a arched corbel feature for the projecting bay at the second floor. Some nice scrolled brackets under the eaves. This wood panel detail under these windows. And then coming around to the back of the house, we see that the quality of the detailing continues all the way around the house. In fact, this door, which is more of the back door into the house, looks more like a traditional front door. My sense is that because of that stairway going up from the street and the garage being located off Torres Drive up at the top of the hill, that the owners of this house over the years have pretty much used this back entrance as the primary entrance into the house. Here's a picture of the two-car garage and some more of the features at the rear yard, rear facade. Just a bit about Postle and Postle and David Postle. This photograph is something that I had never seen before. I'm not sure if any of the commissioners, perhaps Mr. Morgan, has seen this, but I've never known what the municipal plunge looked like. We knew that it was built as part of the overall goal of the Rossmoyne neighborhood, and this photograph was sent to us by one of the librarians at the LA Central Library after Rossmoyne just after Rossmoyne went through the whole process. We got this just after the city council hearing, so it would have been fun. She also sent pictures of the Rossmoyne market and the little commercial stretch. So we've learned a little bit more about Rossmoyne than we knew during the designation process. But he designed this, which is located, the building on the left is the Civic Auditorium. So the parking garage is to the north of the auditorium is where this was located. In Glendale, Postle also designed Temple Sinai later in his career in, I think, 1968. And then the Ford House, this Monterey Revival House on Melwood, which is a designated Glendale Register property. So definitely an architect of some interest. If you've read the staff report, you'll notice that staff is recommending that we not approve this nomination. And we never enjoy doing that because a lot of the houses that we recommend that for are obviously beautiful homes, and this is no exception. But what happened is the addition, which was designed by Claire Earle, and Earle was the designer of the Daly House, which was designated several years ago, so we know him more as a modernist architect. He also did Faye's Dress Shop in Montrose, and the War Memorial, actually on the corner at City Hall, which probably is not his finest work, but definitely a well-known Glendale architect and a talented architect. But what we're looking at here is a photograph of the original condition of the front of the house. So you can see it had a shallow kind of U-shaped profile with this wing projecting, and then I'll show you the other wing we believe projected, although it's hard to say for sure. And what happened was this area at the entrance was infilled. So you can see how this was the original entry door coming up from the stairs from the street, set inside this arch. This arch is now this arch on the inside of the porch where the door is now set. And so you can see the current door is pushed a little forward from the location of the earlier door, which was more recessed, but still this double arch feature is intact inside the porch. But this volume, this two-story volume, filled out basically this area and projected even beyond this front-facing gable of this living room wing. So you can see this projection is shown here, and it's not a very deep projection, so the entire addition was probably, 5 feet, 6 feet at the most. But what it did do is change the kind of overall proportions and massing of the front of the house. And for us in historic preservation, when we're thinking about what meets the criteria, we're no longer looking at the house from 1936 in the way it was intended by the original designer. Another feature is this little accent window, which really is something you associate more with minimal traditional houses rather than Spanish, was kind of put in here. The windows were also changed. I believe at that point, these are still wood windows, but they're not the original configuration of the windows. The sills have been removed, And so these are later replacement windows, which aren't bad replacement windows for a house of this type, but just so you know that not all of the windows on the house are in their original appearance or condition. A bunch of ironwork was recreated based on the precedent of this balconette. So if we go back, yeah, I think I have it here. Oops, sorry. Nope, let's go back. This was reused by Claire Earle, so it was taken off from this location. When they bumped the facade forward, it was reinstalled, and then when new ironwork was added at the loggia at the second floor, and then also at the railing at the first floor porch, the same design motifs were used. So there was definitely care and attention to detail when the addition was made to kind of reflect the early condition. Here's a picture of the windows showing the original sill configuration and windows. And you can see the replacement windows do come close in terms of being divided light windows with the horizontal muntins, but the sill detail has been lost, and there's more of a heavy wood surround rather than the stucco bullnose surround that was in the original condition. So for the reason that the addition so significantly, in our mind, changes the overall design intent, the massing, the proportions, and just the very sense of the house, we are recommending that it not be approved for Glendale Register or for the Mills Act.
Thank you. Do we have a speaker on this?
If you didn't fill out a card, you can fill one out. Go ahead and speak now, and
I
then
just want to say thank you all for your time.
come up and say hi.
Identify your name.
Good afternoon.
Introduce yourself.
Hi, Neil Patel. I'm the owner of 1437. Just want to say thank you for your time and for the application, and it was nice meeting you all at the house the other day.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we'll close the public session and move to comments by commissioners. Any input or thoughts?
Let's go first.
You're going to go first?
I'm going to go last.
I'll go first. I love the house. It's incredibly beautiful, but I have to concur with what the staff has said. Unfortunately, if we could just nominate it for Postel and Postel, but we don't really have, Jay, we don't really have a listing of all of their houses on the Glendale Register.
Yeah, we just have the one that we know
Just
of
the
on
one?
the register. We've seen their name come up a number of times, and Tim Gargery's report listed. They're an interesting firm. They did good work in Los Angeles and also in Glendale. Sometimes it's hard to designate a single property just because of the architect, unless it's like an
Incredible,
exemplary,
yeah.
But they're definitely a firm that we're interested in because everything we've seen has some kind of interest, and especially the municipal plunge. It was very exciting to know that they did that.
Yeah, my problem is I'm not quite sure as to what we're nominating. I mean, if it was an original Postel and Postel, I would be much more pleased to work with it. But the fact that it was changed in 1983, are we really nominating Claire Earle's addition to it? Or are we, it's not really what Mr. Postel, his son David Postel, designed back in 1936. It's his attention to detail is superb, but it's an addition. And unfortunately, the other thing is the Department of Interior's standards for an addition to a house. I mean, it has to be so that you can tell the difference between the two of them.
Yeah, that's to meet one of the standards.
And it like I said, the attention to detail is incredible, but it's different. It's not the house that was originally designed. It's a different house, and unfortunately, I have to concur with staff's opinion, and it shouldn't be nominated. I'm sorry, but that's my feeling on it.
Well, I'm sure we're all going to say that this is a difficult decision, and it always is, but I also would have to agree that, and more specifically, in light of the Historic Resources Survey that was recently done for the Ross Moines neighborhood at large, that we have so many examples of Spanish colonial revival-style homes in the neighborhood that are architecturally intact and have significant features. I've always admired this home at the top of the stairs. I've never actually walked all the way to the top to really look at it, even though I'm delivering flyers in the neighborhood all the time. And it does, I think the addition tried to be sensitive to the original architecture, but as was pointed out, the windows, the articulation or the height of the central addition is not, really in keeping with traditional Spanish colonial revival style massing and relationships and scale. So based on that, I want to thank the owners for their interest in protecting their home, but I would have to agree that I don't think it rises to the level that we generally look for in individually designating properties.
And yes, I'll have to reflect on and enforce what my two colleagues have said. I think that, when you walk up that stairway, when you see the house, it's just striking. And when you walk up that stairway and then halfway up you see this enclosed trellis feature, it's really a dramatic statement in the neighborhood. And, it was really the way Postel and Postel did it, an extraordinary house. And one of the great things about it is, the way the asymmetry and the articulations of the various elevations was so deftly and artfully handled, like a real classic Spanish colonial revival. And I think Claire Earle, in the attempt to enlarge the house, which is something people always want to do, and I understand why, probably didn't do it a good service, because some of that articulation and interest factor went away, kind of turned into sort of I'm trying to be a Mediterranean house. And it, when you have those overhangs on the different roof lines that are kind of competing with one another, for me, there's some problems there, and I think you alluded to that in your report. So, based on those factors, and especially the amount of modification that had been done, I would have to also say that, striking as it is, it just doesn't meet the criteria, and we're all about the criteria. So,
I'm sorry.
Well, I won't belabor the issue, but I just want to say thank you to the homeowner for bringing it forward, for also the great care you are taking of it, and I would say continue with that, even if there's not a historic designation granted today. But I think, the house in its original form was the asymmetry, yet balance, was really what kind of set this off, and I think we've lost a lot of that with the facade coming forward. So I have to concur with staff's report. Is there a motion?
Yeah. If I've got the reading of it.
there you go.
Moved by Commissioner Morgan, that pursuant to sections 2.76.100A and 15.20.050 of the Glendale Municipal Code, the Historic Preservation Commission recommends that the City Council not designate the property at 1437 East Mountain Street as a historic resource, not add the property to the Glendale Register of Historic Resources pursuant to Section 15.20.060 of the said code, and not authorize the city manager to enter into a Mills Act contract for the city.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call.
Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
Commissioner Vartanian.
Yes.
Commissioner Vidor,
Yes.
and Chairperson Shara.
Yes.
Okay.
Next on the agenda, we have 7B, 1134 Berkeley Drive, another Glendale Register nomination and Mills Act contract application.
Okay, for 1134 Berkeley Drive, the owner has his consultant, Juliet Arroyo, will be giving the presentation. I just wanted to recap the staff report because, again, this is a very interesting, lovely house that we're also recommending denial for. In this case, it's also for integrity issues, a little bit different, though, than the house we just looked at on Mountain. Just to place it, here we are up in the hills of Adams Hill. It's on a double lot. It's on a single lot that is built with two properties. So the nomination is just for the historic Pueblo Revival, Spanish Colonial Revival house, not for the duplex adjacent to it. So if the commission were to vote this and it were designated and went to the Mills Act, we'd have to work out with the assessor's office how the valuation of the property ended at some line between this part and the part of the duplex. And that's not, we've done that. Actually, I don't think we've done that before. We have one property that's partially designated, the Brockman Clock Tower, but not the rest of the house, but that doesn't have a Mills Act contract. But this is something other cities do. Basically, the reason for staff recommending denial is not because this isn't a property of great architectural interest. In fact, it's very unique as far as I can tell. In Glendale, there's one classic Pueblo Revival property in the Casa Verdugo neighborhood that I know of. I think it's in Casa Verdugo, and then this house, but it's certainly not a style that was common in Glendale or anywhere in the Los Angeles region. If you remember 1770 Grandview, Casa de Carmen, the house right next to the Brand Gates, that house, when you look at it from the rear elevation, has a few kind of Pueblo Revival features, namely the kind of buttresses that's associated with the style. But this house is kind of much more integrated into that style. The issues staff has are basically that the exterior of the house no longer has physical integrity in terms of its historic fabric. There is little to nothing, unless the front door is original, that actually dates to the period of construction. The three primary issues are the stucco cladding, which was replaced in a recent renovation campaign that also led to this two-story addition above the garage. The stucco now is a very rough sand finish stucco that's not associated with the type of stucco that would have been applied to buildings in the 1920s, and certainly not to a Pueblo Revival, where it's really important, the idea of this almost like the plaster being put over adobe bricks, where there's a real kind of molded, sculpted, hand-formed quality to houses in that style. In addition, the windows were all replaced during the same building campaign. There are no muntin grids, and in the designation report, there is a drawing from the architect, and Juliet, I'm sure, will fill you in on that in her presentation, that shows the original windows had divided lights with three muntins across each window. In addition, the placement of the windows in the wall is different than what would have most likely, we can't say for sure, but almost certainly would have been there historically, where there would have been more of a sill detail under each window. So without further ado, unless the commissioners have any questions for me, we'll let Ms. Arroyo take over the show. And Juliet? Did we not get all the slides? Here's your controller. And worst case, we'll go back to, actually, let me have that 1 second, make sure. Here, thank you.
Just going to turn to the first page.
No, let me just, this isn't your first slide, right?
No.
Okay, we're going to get rid of this. My cut and paste did not work. And if you could
Down
give,
there, number 5.
say that one more time.
Number 5.
Yeah, what I'm going to do is if you could give me your thumb drive again, we'll just work off of that rather than jump around. Thanks.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Juliet Boyle. I'm a historic resource consultant that was hired by Stephen Smith to prepare the nomination for his house. And we've actually been working on this a couple years, right? Probably a couple years. I visited the home maybe 2 years ago and then about a year ago. And then I started this year working on the formal nomination. I have to differ, of course, with the staff report. I found that it was eligible for the Glendale Register. In fact, when I visited the home, 2 years ago, I looked at it and, it appeared to be eligible, but I hadn't done the work. And then I looked at it again and saw that it looked very likely to be eligible. So I told Stephen Smith that, and I proceeded with the report. And I differ with the style and then the eligibility. I don't see the Pueblo Revival. It's the Spanish Colonial Revival style. And it's in the report, I described that it's castle-like because it has the vertical orientation, the form, the shape. It has a lot of windows. It has lookout areas. It was built...
Juliet, if you want, you can advance your slides using the arrows.
Okay. It was built in 1925 by a pair of sisters from San Diego that hired Clifford Colburn to design and build this house. Now, we don't know exactly what the relationship was and who had the lead on designing the house, but I believe it was probably the builder, because a lot of the builders in Glendale were also designers that took a lot of their influences from other European types, and that actually they created a Spanish Colonial Revival style in Glendale. What makes this eligible is its architectural significance. It's one of the few castle-like buildings in Glendale. There are several, maybe about 5 in Glendale. And there is one on the register right now. But there's a couple others, and they're typically in the hills. The most important element is its shape, its form, its size, its orientation, its sitting. And the features, of course, are also important. But the primary significance is its vertical massing, its roof lines. It has the battlement tower that, of course, is highly characteristic of kind of a storybook castle type property. And it was built in 1925. And it was actually in the early 20s, the Spanish colonial styles were not highly they didn't have a lot of ornamentation. So I believe that this building was never intended to have tile and wrought iron. And it was supposed to look more statuesque and more of a fortress type of property than a Spanish palace. And it has the long winding walkway that resembles a type of a moat, and it's sitting up in the hill. It has a great view of Glendale looking out the front windows to the north. And here's the original advertisement for the property from the Glendale Evening News in 1925 that shows his, of course this is an illustration, and it was around the time that he was designing it, so this may not have been the final look of the building, but it was real close to when it was built. So of course he's advertising that he's a designer and he could build other beautiful homes in Glendale. And the alterations that Jay mentioned, let's see, I'll go over those. The first one was the 2-story addition over the garage, and you can see in this illustration that was an addition, and it was. The current owner added a 2-story addition over the garage in about 2007, 2008. And that actually went to Design Review Board, and they approved it. And, Design Review Board typically consults with planning to see if it's changing the architectural significance of the property. And, of course, I saw the addition, too, and I thought it was really well integrated into the overall design of the building. It was made to be subordinate to the original facade. And the other issue was the windows. I'll go back. Here's, the most important thing about the windows in this design is their placement, their orientation, how many there are, The windows that were in there, and prior to this replacement, they were aluminum slider windows. So yes, these maybe they're not, the original wood windows that they had, but they are a big improvement over what was there before, which were the aluminum. And then the other issue was the stucco. It's still stucco. Like Jay said, it probably was smooth, hand-troweled stucco over the entire facade of the building. But over the years, again, probably when the windows were replaced in the 80s, they also did a rougher. It's still smooth right now, but in the 80s they did a more of a textured, which was really popular in the time, a textured stucco finish. So this one, maybe it's not as smooth as the original, but it still has a smooth texture to it. And I was just pointing this out because this is the old Woolworths building on Brand, and the whole second story is an addition. And this is on the register right now, and it was approved by City Council. So this is a commercial building, but you're on the Glendale Register. Is of the homes that are on the Glendale Register or eligible for the Glendale Register, additions happen to houses over time. So the register also allows some flexibility. Maybe the National Register, it's stricter in terms of architectural integrity. But this is just an example of what was approved by City Council, a second-story addition. The two-story addition over the garage, shown here on the right, as I mentioned, it was made subordinate to the original form, vertical massing, roof lines. The report, which you have here, finds that it's eligible for the Glendale Register. And as I mentioned, I disagree with the staff report in terms of the style, the Pueblo Revival, which is really more of a New Mexico style, and then with the alterations. And I'm going to have the owner, Stephen Smith, speak.
May we ask you a question before you go? Is that appropriate, Jay? Could you please explain what you mean when you say the addition is made subordinate?
I would find that it would meet the Secretary of the Interior standards if I had to go through the exercise. Stephen told me that he had an architect design it. Let me find.
I guess I'm really looking for a definition of your word subordinate and
subordinate. You don't want it.
How the addition.
You don't want the addition to really change the architecture of the house, of course. And a lot of historic buildings have additions. A lot of them, even the National Register. And you want to make the addition subordinate. And you don't want it to look like it matches perfectly, like that was the original design of the house. So you'll see the windows. From this angle, it's lower. It's lower than the. It's lower than the primary tower with the battlements. It's set back. It's around the. It's actually the parcel it wraps around the street. So this addition is on the side of the wrap. So it's not directly in the front of the house. The windows were different. They don't match the main portion of the house, which is good. It is tall, and it is like a wing. It's like, it has the tower, it has the connector, and it has the other tower, and then added to that is this wing, this addition over the garage. So it's an extension of the house. It doesn't alter the facade of the house. It still has here's the formal entry, the winding staircase to the front door, and the addition is on the right. So the main component of the house is in three parts, the two towers and then the connector. So this is a fourth part of the house, and it's over the garage. So here's the original drawing. which shows the garage, and without the addition, of course. And we couldn't find any historic photos of the house other than this one.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Julia? Okay.
Well, I do have kind of a question. The windows, the arched windows on the addition, are they they're there so that to differentiate from the rest of the house itself?
Yeah, so all the other original windows, the openings haven't changed. The windows, of course, have changed, but the openings have not changed. They were squared, rectangular openings. And the addition, which, of course, this was Stephen and the architect's decision, to make them rounded. Again, you don't want the addition to look like it's part of the original construction.
And that's the reason for the windows that way?
Yeah, the rounded tops. And then the roof line, it's flat. You want it to be flat, of course, to blend in with the original structure. But, if it were to have deep recessed battlements or some kind of overhang, it would take away from the original structure. So it has it has some kind of interest in the roof line, but it's very minimal, subordinate to the main roof line, which is the battlement tower.
Anyone else? Okay. Stephen?
Open the public hearing?
Yes.
Open the public hearing. Introduce yourself.
Alrighty, my name is Stephen Smith, and I'm the owner of the property. I bought it approximately 6 years ago, and when I bought it, there was already a level over the garage that had been built. I don't know if it was done with permits, but in any event, it was ultimately torn down, and then those two levels were built over the garage. I did a number of interviews with architects during the process of trying to find somebody that could assist me. And the gentleman I chose was Kurt Sturgill, who is a local Glendale architect. His office is a couple blocks from here, actually. And the reason I chose him was of his past involvements in dealing with historical buildings. So he has had, history in dealing with properties that were on historical registers, or had gotten on, not only in Glendale, but other areas throughout L.A. County. But what I can also say is that when I purchased the property, also 6 years ago, it did have a rough stucco, but during the restocking of the property, I contemplated doing smooth surface, or the commonly referred to as a Santa Barbara finish. But if anybody is familiar with the cost of that, it just precluded me from doing that. It was just way too expensive. I am a general contractor, among other things, and what I ended up doing was choosing more of a very fine sand stucco, which is as close to a smooth stucco as you can get. There's really only 3 types of stucco, finished stucco, that you can put on. So it was sort of a compromise, is maybe what I'm getting at. But that's pretty much it. I'm obviously a little bit subjective in my view, but I feel that it has a number of characteristics that should get it onto the historical register. That's really all I have to say. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll close the public hearing. Want to start?
Happy to start. Well, I have to say something personal. I'm from Adams Hill neighborhood, and it's really always wonderful to see people doing things to their houses, and we're all concerned about our neighborhood, which has a number of authentic period homes in it, and it's a beautiful hilly neighborhood. This house certainly, by definition of its elevation and height and magnitude, stands out on the
Commissioner
hill.
Vidor, we just realized, did you get the mailing notice for this property?
I'm not within 300 feet.
500 feet?
I'm not within 500 feet.
You didn't get the notice?
No.
Okay, great.
Yes, I didn't.
We just-
If I did, I'd be
forgot
recused.
I forgot
Yeah.
to double-check the map.
Sure.
so,
No,
yeah.
Adams Hill is a big neighborhood.
Yes.
And this is on the opposite end of Adams Hill. But, we try not to be subjective up here, and, there are a number of historic and period homes in Glendale, so we want to really stick with the criteria and try to make the evaluation according to the criteria. I think the rehab you did is really lovely and beautiful. And I know that it even had some issues before you rehabbed it. I see the rehab that you did, be it castle-like, Spanish colonial, or Pueblo. It probably has elements of all of those, as being a rather contemporary interpretation of a revival home. And it does look beautiful. The sand finish, I think, is an issue, but probably not as much of an issue for me as the two other features. One, I think the windows, as Mr. Platt described them in the report, are really contemporary style windows that pay homage to another era. And there's a lot of that type of thing going on. And I think we have some houses that have been built recently in Glendale and some commercial businesses in what you call the Santa Barbara style that are very much in the tradition of neo-Spanish, and which is what I guess it's called now, if it was built in the late 20th, early 21st century. And this house, for me now, beautiful as it is, looks very much like a neo-Spanish home. So I think whatever the historic fabric was or should be probably has been taken away. I also really don't understand the addition and seeing that as subordinate. To me, it doesn't look subordinate. It looks like it was designed and built in to really completely integrate with the house. And I'm not sure why in the rule of differentiation of an addition on an old house, one window with an archway would define differentiation here. The window is essentially the same type of window as the other windows, and I really see it integrating very beautifully into the house. So it's essentially become part of the house, changing the massing and scale of the house. So I think all those things together, a little bit the stucco issue, a lot about the windows issue, and the addition, for me, put it in the category of a beautiful Adams Hill home, but really, looking at the criteria the way we're supposed to look at them, that I can't get to it being eligible for landmark status. I'm done. Thank you.
Okay, I'm really on the fence with this property. I do agree. I don't think the addition is subordinate to the rest of the house. I do think it fits in nicely. Somehow it doesn't bother me. But Jay, I have a question for you. According to the Secretary of the Interior's standards, how would we, how do I want to articulate this? What elements would differentiate that? In other words, how could that addition have been better differentiated?
Generally, and the standards are just guidelines. It's not like a straight set of rules. So it's subject to interpretation, and we can all be 180 degrees from each other and still say we're supporting the standards. In this case, if this house, I always like to think if this house were on the register and someone came to us and said we'd like to build an addition, how would we guide them to build that addition? And in almost every situation, and I know the lot here might be a little tight, we would try to move the massing of the addition to the rear of the property, away from the main facade, away from the street, so that we can still have the same volumetric understanding of the original design There are situations, however, where additions are appropriate on the front of a building or easily visible from the street. There are other subtle ways to differentiate things, and even within hardcore preservation circles, this standard is the most controversial of all of the standards, and there are some people who are saying that an addition that exactly matches the historic property, but perhaps has a date stone or something just to indicate it was built in 2008 instead of 25, might be the appropriate way. I don't think this is the kind of property where that would be an appropriate solution at a single-family residential level. That's usually kind of a big institutional type of property. I agree with the commissioners who said that the segmental arch over the window is being presented as a differentiation, but I don't think that's actually, that it doesn't work that way, especially since most of the other windows on the addition do match the windows on the house. If there were a situation where we could consider an addition like this, you might say, well, if the main historic body of the house had divided light windows, and then the addition maybe didn't have divided light windows but still kept the window pattern and the opening sizes, that's kind of a subtle way to sometimes make it clear that this came later. There are lots of different ways, but in general, the biggest issue here is the loss of the terrace, which we understand was already missing with that first addition, but that was more or less kind of a wood construction that could have easily been removed and restored the terrace back to its original condition. And then just the change of the overall massing of the house is an issue.
Any other commissioners?
I have,
Any thoughts?
Yeah, go ahead. I'll gather
well, I
my
have the
thoughts
same
and then-
concerns that you have, Commissioner, on this house. I find it an incredibly intriguing house. The windows are a problem. I mean, when you look at it, you can see the outlines of a 1925 house, but the windows make it 2010. It's just there's this juxtaposition between the windows and the rest of the house. I'm not so upset about the stucco cladding, though it would have been nicer to have a smooth cladding. The addition fits right in. I mean, if I had not known, I would have thought it was part of the house to begin with. But the windows are a major concern on this house, and the fact that there aren't any sills anymore, and the fact that we have a certain standard to live up to, and I don't know if we're begging the standard by saying, well, 90% of the house is really great and 10% doesn't really work. So
I have a couple thoughts. One, I want to commend the homeowner for the amazing renovation and really preservation of the structure. But I think there's different levels being done from the owner's perspective and then from what the historic preservation standards are. So what I see here is a beautifully maintained, kept up, renovated home. However, it's gone more towards a modernization than a preservation or a returning to what was. And as I look at the 1925 picture, if we can go back to that, Jay. What I love about this residence is it's an unbelievable fairy tale, castle-like home that steps down beautifully from the top tower on the left to kind of the terrace over the entry to the terrace on the right. And as it wraps kind of that hillside, it's just the balance is there. And I think you see that in a lot of the hillside homes where it's kind of stepping down as it kind of molds to the shape around it. And I really think that the addition on the right dramatically, in my opinion, ruins what was. And I think part of this home is the view. I mean, incredible view. So to lose the terrace, which is just citywide views, to me, is a big issue. And then I think why windows are so important to us is that it's really like the eyes on the face of the house. And to me, in this 1925 picture, there's personality and glimmer and life to the face. And as I look at what's now a beautiful, again, renovation, I see almost a blank stare coming from the windows. And that alone takes a lot away from what it was, I believe. And if we're trying to be cognizant of preserving history, also being sympathetic to additions, I would have to agree kind of with Jay's thought process. Would we have approved this today had it been on the register and they wanted to make an addition or switch out windows? And my decision would be absolutely not. And that's so unfortunate because it's a phenomenal house and it still is that. And I just want to say to the owner, it doesn't take anything away from this beautiful home you have, whether it is or isn't on the register. And I think, once again, we're so fortunate to have a homeowner who will take care of this great, residence and do it justice. And you have, I think, renovated it to just a different level. I think historic preservation looks at maybe outside in, and you as a homeowner look at it from inside out. Even the reason, as you expressed to me when I was there, why you didn't put the mullions back in the windows, because you wanted to enjoy the view. Whereas historic preservation would say that's critical to the exterior rather than looking inside out. So I don't know if that helps you kind of understand where we are. We are in a predicament, and I always know it's unfortunate to, again, have to not recommend something for the register, again, because this is a phenomenal property. But I would have to agree personally with the staff's report.
So I think I'm hearing that our main point of contention is the windows.
Yes.
For the addition, Commissioner Morgan, I think, are you also?
I'm not so much bothered by the addition.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Sorry. No, as I stated before, I'm not so much bothered by the addition myself either. I know we look at, as Commissioner Shire or Chair Shire just indicated, we do look at the homes from the outside in, from a preservation perspective. The owner did kindly give us a tour of the inside of the home, and it's a tight living space, and I recognize that, the way people live has changed, and at a certain level we have to expect additions. Would this have been approved as designed? Probably not, but I don't find the addition particularly offensive. I would agree that the windows, and Jay, just because I honestly am not that familiar with Pueblo Revival architecture, and another reason why I'm wavering on this property is because of the statement that was made. I think that we rarely encounter Pueblo Revival architecture in Glendale or in the region. And then I think we couldn't really tell, or I don't know if we could tell from the drawing, if probably the windows were bull-nosed. I don't know if they would have had sills.
We can't tell from the drawing. Pueblo Revival is kind of a sub-variant. It's similar to Spanish Colonial. This is kind of a hybrid. And to my eye, and I know Juliet and I may disagree on this, but it definitely has a lot of strong features of Pueblo Revival. But just thinking to period windows in general, and using Spanish as kind of the model, there's typically either a wooden sill or a wood sill set on a stucco sill to give that sense of depth and recess, and then usually the point of a sill is to project slightly forward from the wall so that when it sheds water, it drips off the sill instead of running down the face of the house. There are some houses with steel casement windows where the casement windows are set closer to the front of the window, or to the front of the opening. There's still some sort of sill detail. But looking at this drawing, and Juliet was absolutely right, we don't know that it was built to look exactly like this. But when I saw this drawing, these windows were the kind that I pictured, at least in terms of the muntin pattern, the way that the casements are divided, just for window openings that are kind of taller rectangular openings like that. So the idea of the sill is kind of speculative,
Okay.
but very typical.
Okay. So I certainly don't disagree that I think the windows give the home a more modern appearance and feel. I'm wondering how the commission feels about asking the homeowner to, or making it a requirement if we considered going forward, changing the windows out. I mean, is there any room for...
So basically remodeling his house again, or?
Well, it's just a suggestion as a means to bring the house back.
You yesterday showed some plastic snap-on grids.
Do you need him to come forward? Do we have to open the public hearing
if you want to
again?
ask a question.
We need to open the public hearing again.
I'm sorry.
Come forward.
Okay. Steve Smith here again. And I thought that I had left out there in the dining room for everybody to see their wood snap-ons to give it that exact or approximate look of what those windows would look like back then in the 20s.
But they wouldn't be palpable from the outside. The snap-ons are on the inside.
They're on the inside, but you can, from the outside, you can still see them, and it would have that same visual effect from the street, anyway. But, I've asked myself this question, and that is, if those ladies, those two sisters, 2 years after this property was built, went back to that builder and said, hey, I want to enclose that porch, that open porch, and I also want to expand on the master bedroom, would that builder, have done exactly what my architect would have done? And I don't know the answer. I don't know if anybody does. But I would have to say that it would be probably very similar to what my architect. But I would be amenable, if this commission would be amenable to coming back at a later date, possibly, seeing what, if any, difference that might make. But if not, that's fine, too.
Thank you. Okay, public session closed again. Well, for me personally, I wouldn't be opposed at a later date if the owner wants to come forward with, the concerns remedied. However, for me, it wouldn't just be windows. I would have to say, I would certainly hope the builder and contractor would not have done an addition, as is there today. I find it awkward within the exterior wall of the terrace and how the addition is done, not even built out to that wall, but built out with like a 12-inch kind of space at some parts of that, kind of an awkward, I don't know what to call that, kind of set back crevice.
Unusable terrace.
Unusable space. And again, I go back to this picture, and I just think if I saw the two, one day, one photo one day, one photo the next, would I even see much resemblance? And I have to say, to me, it's gone through some substantial changes that I don't get the same feeling and impact and historic preservation, or rising to the level of being on the historic register with the house today. I also think that there's, like I said, there's two different approaches. One is modernization and renovation, which is this phenomenal job of preserving this structure for a new homeowner living in 2012. However, the updates and modernization has not been sympathetic to historic preservation. It isn't, how can I most likely take this back to what it was? Still being livable, but the beauty of what it was, I agree with Jay, the addition would have come down. You would have built back that beautiful terrace to sit outside, to enjoy the out of doors and the views, which are spectacular, which the house was designed to, appreciate and celebrate at the time it was built. So to me, it's a little more than windows, but of course, it's the other commissioners have to weigh in as well.
I appreciate your gung-ho-edness to consider doing things to the house, and I think at some future date we could look at it. However, I wouldn't be amenable to an approval on conditions, because I think the types of things I would envision, which are very much in line with Chair Shire's viewpoint, would take a considerable amount of detailing and design review activity to get to that point. I think, as Commissioner Shire said, there's nothing wrong with a remodel, a rehab, and a modernization of an old house. And there's nothing wrong with contemporary takes on older styles of architecture. And I think that in pursuit of the historic designation, I think you really have to think about what you really, really want. And, so we shouldn't approve anything here today, because this is very complex. It isn't just, well, take that thing off the door and we're fine. It's, we're talking about some very, very extensive revisitings of your very beautiful remodel. So I would say that, both things, the windows, which are contemporary to me, and the original deck, which is a very defining feature of the elevations and the character of the front of the house and side of the house, are issues that would have to be addressed at some point in the future. But the house, as you remodeled it, is quite beautiful.
If you want.
Okay, we'll open the public
reopen the
session again.
This is, for those of us who don't understand, that little captain's walk there over the garage was done simply for setback purposes, current zoning requirements, today's zoning requirements. Initially, the plan was to build it flush up against, but we were turned down for that, and we had to do a little bit of a setback, so that's why it's there. Just wanted.
Thank you. Public session closed again. Okay, let's wrap this item up. Are there any more comments, or is there a motion?
Well, I have to agree with you, Commissioner Shire, that, it is a modernization versus a restoration. And it's a lovely house. And I like the architecture and the way it sits on the lot. But the windows are a breaking point for me. I mean, it is a modernization. That's great and wonderful, and you're to be commended, but it's not a restoration. We've had many people come here who've worked very hard to do a restoration for a house, and we would be selling them short if we said, oh, well, it's okay for you, and all the other people, we've held them to the highest standard and said, yeah. So I guess that's my bottom line, so.
I would concur, and I do appreciate your suggestion to maybe come back at a future date to think about some changes that you may want to make and taking it back a little closer to original. But thank you for your time and your interest.
Is there a motion?
Okay, I move that pursuant to Section 2.76100A and 15.20.050 of the Glendale Municipal Code, the Historic Preservation Commission recommends that City Council not designate the property at 1134 Berkeley Drive as a historic resource, not add the property to the Glendale Register of Historic Resources pursuant to Section 15.20.060 of said code, and not authorize the city manager to enter into a Mills Act contract for the property. The recommendation for not designating the property is based on the Commission's finding that the property does not meet any of the designation criteria established by the municipal code.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Roll call?
Commissioner Morgan,
Sadly, yes.
Commissioner Vartanian,
Yes.
Commissioner Vidor,
Yes.
and Chairperson Shah.
Yes. Thank you very much. Next on the agenda, 7C, 1407 Imperial Drive, another Glendale Register nomination and Mills Act contract application. We're just waiting for Christina's presentation.
Forget it, just don't worry about it. Go. We're good, we're good. We're good, yeah, we have plenty. We're good. Go.
Okay, 7C.
Okay. Good afternoon, members of the Commission. Today, I'm going to present to you Glendale Register nomination and Mills Act application for 1407 Imperial Drive. This house is located in the Rossmoyne neighborhood. It's just outside the bounds of the Royal Boulevard Historic District. This home was built in 1932. The builder was M. Bergbacher and Sons. There's no architect listed for this house, although, like we said in the past, it's not uncommon for that.
Can you get closer to the microphone? Thank you.
So as I was saying, the house was built in 1932 by the firm of M. Bergbacher and Sons. Bergbacher was German by birth. He immigrated to this country in 1884. This is better.
Yes, much better.
Okay. As I was saying, the architect for the property remains unknown. The house is L-shaped in plan. It features multiple roof lines in keeping with the characteristics of the Tudor Revival style. The primary roof is side-gabled, with front gabled wall dormers punctuating the eave, as you can see here. The house's asymmetrical front facade is dominated by a double-height front-facing entry gable and massive brick chimney. Both these features are clad in clinker brick and red brick. The front gable features a Tudor arched entry door recessed with a heavy plaster door surround using splayed jam blocks. Fenestration consists of steel divided like double casement windows with vertical rectangular panes. There's a narrow recessed vertical casement window with leaded diamond panes in the front gable end above the doorway. You can see here. At the left side of the front facade is a shallow oriel window with steel casement diamond panes, a metal roof, and a heavy wood surround supported by wood corbels. The second floor projects just slightly at the right side of the front facade, and this is supported by heavy wood corbels. The projection and the two wall dormers feature half timbering. This is a detail seen, of course, commonly in Tudor Revival styles, but in this house, it's only seen at these two features. A steeply pitched side gable porte cochere supported by hand-hewn wood beams and triangular knee braces is attached to the east facade of the house. A concrete driveway at the porte cochere that leads to the detached rear garage features an irregular reticulated pattern. This is a feature that's seen commonly in period revival homes. The three-car garage clad with textured stucco features a steeply pitched hipped roof, a venting dormer, and a wood window, which is not visible in this picture. The window may not be original. The rear facade of the house, so the rear is much less articulated than the front. This, we were thinking, may have been due to the Great Depression. The house was built during that time, and so there's just, to say, less ornamented. The rear facade features front gabled wall dormers with steel divided light casement windows and horizontal wood in the gable ends. Here. A steeply pitched front gabled two-story projecting wing at the rear forms one end of a full-length porch covered by a shed roof. Projection features a one-story shed roof addition with new aluminum windows. The landscaping at the rear and at the front of the house is lush. There are trees, ivy-shaped topiary, and rose bushes. A swimming pool, which was built in the 50s, is adjacent to the rear porch, and the backyard steps down behind the swimming pool to a grassy area that once featured a recreational court. The barbecue that you see here is original. This platform is new, but this segmental arch and the keystone, these are all original features. Character-defining features of the house include, but are not limited to, the brick-clad front entrance gable with the decorative door-surrounding wood front door, steeply pitched roofs, rectangular paned and diamond-lighted steel casement windows, the half timbering, and the horizontal wood siding at the side gables. The staff finds that the nominated property appears to meet criterion D for listing on the register, in that the property has outstanding architectural design, details, materials, and craftsmanship of 1920s revival.
Thank you. I don't have a blue sheet. I don't know if the homeowner wanted to come forward.
Apologize.
You may, yes. We'll open the public hearing.
Members of the Commission, my name is Randy Sartor. I'm the homeowner. I just wanted to say a few words. My wife and I both enjoyed having everyone come by our home yesterday. It's a house that we love. We've lived in it now for 9 years. Our hope is that we can continue to live in it and enjoy it as long as the previous owners lived in it, which they lived in it for 50 years. And it's still a neighborhood. There's still many members of the neighborhood that refer to it as the Smith House, and that's okay because that's who enjoyed it for 50 years. In the 9 years that we've lived there, we've gone to considerable length to try and preserve the exterior of it, and as well as gone on what I consider to be just wild goose chases to try and find the missing part or the missing piece to try and complete some part of the inside to keep everything as original as possible. Along the way, we've also met and partnered up with a lot of what I consider great artisans from the past that have helped us to restore plaster. I've learned my lesson as to not to touch lathe and plaster on a wall after having a plasterer laugh at me for what I did to try and cut a very small hole. But in any event, we enjoy our house. We love our home. We appreciate your consideration for putting it up on historical status. If there's any questions that you have during this meeting, I'd be happy to answer them for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, commissioners?
Well, certainly, some decisions are really difficult to make, others are a lot easier, and I think this nomination today is a lot easier for me. The house is beautiful. It's obvious. Could we go back to the facade of the house, please? It's obviously a very fine example of a Tudor revival style home. For me, the ornamentation, there's so much going on at the front of the house that the viewer can hardly take it all in at one glance, from the half timbers to that, very beautiful gabled brick entry with the doorways surround, to the diamond-paned windows, to the double-sized chimney with, I think it's got some chimney pots up there. It's remarkable that I think all of the windows in the home, except for those at a small addition at the back, are original, and they have the original pull-down screens of the period as well, which I understand the homeowners have restored lovingly. I think it's also an interesting, probably socioeconomic note of the period that the owners put a lot of their resources into the front of the house that would be seen most by people going by, and the back of the house is rather simple and stark, if I may. So for me, I will support the designation of this property, and I thank you for bringing it forward. Thank you.
I have to concur with Commissioner Vartanian. This house just screams 1932. It's just an excellent. This is truly a restoration. This house is gorgeous. I've been past it many times over the years, and it's just every detail, every period portion of it is just perfect. The windows, the brick cladding, the rough-hewn timbers. It's just. Staff said that it should be on the GR, and I believe it should be.
Thank you.
I agree with my fellow commissioners. One of the things I did was, after visiting, and thank you very much for your hospitality, was drive around the neighborhood and look at other Tudor revival houses. I think that just like with the Spanish colonial houses in Glendale, we have a lot of wonderful Tudor houses. And so my question in my mind when I looked at the house was, are all these other houses that I'm looking at that are either, quite beautiful or contributing structures in a historic district, would they also be eligible, and are they of an equivalent distinction to this house? And I thought about it a lot. I think, for the reasons already cited, this house is very distinctive and has, a real collection of features that showcase the whole era of, Tudor revival and love of that style of architecture here in America. So I'm going forward with my agreement on the register with a little side bubble on the side of my brain saying, do we understand the difference between a contributing structure level Tudor revival house, since we have so many, and in a house of this caliber? And, can we as commissioners make the distinction? And I think we can. But it was a question that I considered quite a bit yesterday as I went around. So yes, I am, for the reasons cited, supporting nomination.
And I too agree with my fellow commissioners, and just want to commend the homeowners, Randy and Stacy, for your amazing restoration and time and resources and energy put into maintaining this home and restoring it so carefully. So thank you very much for that. The only minor issue I have with this house, and would suggest, if granted the Mills Act, which also provides tax reduction to help maintain and keep up the property, would be to include in the contract over the next maybe 2 years or so, to remove the skylights from the back covered porch. If we could go to the back elevation for a minute. I think just with the topics we've had today and other residences, I know it's on the back facade, but those, to me, bother me. And if we're keeping a home on the historic register and also given the Mills Act, which is kind of that highest level of preservation, that would be one thing I would like the other commissioners to kind of weigh in on and see if that would be something to consider putting in the Mills Act contract.
If I could just clarify that as you're discussing it, would you want to see the removal of the presence of skylights, or just possibly replacement with skylights that may not be as obtrusive?
That would be fine. Less obtrusive, or either minimalized or removed. Either way, I just think from the back, there's four in a row that stand out pretty substantially, especially from the upper deck. So that would be my preference.
Discussion?
Oh, okay, I'll go. I concur. I think it would be a good idea to remove them. I don't know much about skylights, so I'm not sure how one would get a skylight that would more aptly blend into the style of roof, but the way the roof is now is definitely a candidate for some Mills Act improvement. But the house is so, I kind of got blinded to that. I was so impressed with the level of detail in your restoration, but on second evaluation, yes, I would agree. I would concur.
I think I will concur as well. I know the homeowners expressed that those skylights are in perfect condition and they don't leak, and they didn't want to touch them. But if we're doing a Mills Act designation, they do detract from the original feel of the home. And again, I don't know if there's any kind of skylight that's could be less obtrusive. Hopefully there is in our day and age.
Picturing, and I can't tell for sure. These look like they have a rounded bubble profile.
The bubble.
Yeah.
I think if we just went with a flat profile. It's up to the chair.
I don't think it's necessary.
Yeah.
I would leave the decision up to you, Jay, as far as working with the homeowner.
Mm-hmm.
And even time frame to me would be reasonable. I just noticed on the Mills Act there weren't any upcoming projects, listed in association with it, so this might be one that they could do with some of the cost savings over the next few years.
Sure. The general time frame, we usually give people a year for smaller projects unless either the owner objects and asks for more time, or if we think it's a big enough project. So I would recommend that we give a year for the end of 2013 to have the work done.
We'll open the hearing. Go ahead. Confer.
Just so I'm sorry. Just so I understand, is it the skylight portion, or is it the actual, because they do bubble up, and my guess is when that was built on was probably sometime in the 50s when the pool went on. As far as what skylights were available back then, I would say nothing's been changed to them. Is it the actual sky? You're not asking me to close in those actual sections?
I think it could be a choice to you if you would either you could close them in, or you could have them be much more minimal in profile, that they weren't kind of bubbling up above the roof. And I think your home is so beautiful in the roof line and even roofing material is just stunning that I think it would just be even that much more exemplary if those were not taking your eye away from structure.
If it's permissible, I would prefer to find something. I do like the fact that they light up that area, because that area it projects out almost 15 feet it becomes somewhat like a cave on a cloudy day.
Also for your living room, brings
Yeah,
light in.
and and we went through this with the addition, to try and find that roof tile does not exist anymore. So, I've searched every yard. So lower profile, I don't have a problem. Those are not my favorite feature of the home.
Yeah.
By the way.
Yeah, I think the goal would be to have them not look like plastic bubbles, and there are plenty out there. We'll be able to find something.
It's easy. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Is there a motion?
So the last
You're the one.
standard. I move that pursuant to sections 2.76.11a and 15.20050 of the Glendale Municipal Code, the Historic Preservation Commission recommends that the City Council designate the property at 1407 Imperial Drive as a historic resource, add the property to the Glendale Register of Historic Resources pursuant to Section 152060 of said code, and authorize the city manager to enter into a Mills Act contract for the property with the condition that the owner either omit the skylights or replace them with skylights that don't have a visible bubble on the top.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call.
Commissioner Morgan,
Yes.
Commissioner Bartarian.
Yes.
Commissioner Vidor,
Yes.
and Chairperson Shah.
Yes. Thank you very much. Congratulations. Okay, now on the agenda, we'll take care of old business, 6A. This is the consideration of commissioner-generated proposals for future discussions. And we have a handout. Do you want to cover this, Jay?
Yeah. This month, we don't have any new items on the list, and by no means do we expect or need to have new items on the list every month unless commissioners have important things that are coming up. And then we have the item that was brought up last month is agendized for tonight's discussion, or this afternoon's discussion.
Okay. So we'll just move to 6B.
And 6B, we've added as an ongoing item to the agenda per the Commission's request. And this is basically our chance to brainstorm a little bit about thinking about Preservation Month next year in May, so that we can, I think, considering that we didn't have a lot of lead time last year or this year, we did a nice job with the display and then also the event with the Historical Society. We can certainly do a little more with more notice and more time to work on it. And strangely, I went to a workshop a few years ago from the National Alliance of Preservation Commissions, and they specifically addressed how can our preservation commissions do things for Preservation Month. And they had the idea, well, why doesn't the commission sponsor an ice cream social where the commissioners scoop ice cream for the members of the public? And so that's the kind of thing other commissions do, just to give you an idea. I'm not saying that that's something we want to do here. It could be amusing, though. But
At the good house.
well, I actually know someone who has an old-fashioned ice cream maker who wears a whole get-up but I can't volunteer him at this point. But anyways, that's at this point early on, we're pretty much open to all sorts of ideas, and then as we refine them over the next few months, my sense is we'll have more concrete discussions about who's going to do what, who can help, and assign kind of responsibilities.
I know when we last talked about this subject, we were talking about potentially partnering with the Glendale Historic Society.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be the person to approach that, or one of the commissioners, just to see if there's any interest?
We could do that either way. I'm happy to help. We were in regular contact. So.
Just to see if they have any even events that we could partner with them on, help them, and have a larger turnout potentially.
Yeah, it could be an annual celebration where we do one type of event. We have the materials from this year for the library, and we already have the display case reserved for next year in case we want to do that again. So that can be an ongoing.
Good.
The Historical Society's co-sponsored historic bike ride with the various bicycling groups in town. So that's another possibility.
I think we also talked about a walking tour of the historic core.
We did, and we have the ability to get a map, and we have a lot of information about these buildings in the Civic Center, so that would be a fairly easy thing to do, and that would be a great co-sponsorship opportunity.
Great. And then I think we still have on our list maybe a viewing of When Glendale Ruled the Skies.
All right.
Yeah.
That could be an exciting tie-in with the project at Grand Central Air Terminal.
Oh, absolutely. To raise awareness.
Yeah. Well, Jay, do you want to speak with them this next month and see if one of those they're more interested in partnering with us on, and then we can just each month make progress on those, the organization of that?
Okay, so next month I'll report back on what opportunities we think we have, kind of finalize a short list of options.
Could we do something with the Glendale Unified School District, like their 5th grade? Is that too broad for a Historic Preservation Month?
It's a great idea. I think if you want to kind of refine that and think about some ideas. Yeah, there's just with staff cutbacks, there will be a limited amount of staff time for a lot of these things. So the more commissioner involvement and collaboration with community groups, the better.
Okay.
I don't know what we have yet in the way of literature, but at this point we've really achieved huge critical mass with historic districts. And is there a brochure on the historic districts at this point? Obviously, it's going to have to be changed, so you wouldn't want to do anything too permanent. But something that, say, on a walking tour, people who are coming on that could be given some more information about historic Glendale.
Yeah, for a walking tour, we haven't really thought because the districts are kind of spread out. And
Oh, no, not including it in the walking tour. I'm just saying some literature so people could go off and explore.
Yeah, one of our longer range goals is to have some new promotional brochures for the Glendale Register and for historic districts, which would be more general. If you're interested in this, here's some real basic information that we could use as handouts at community meetings and keep on the counter. So it's definitely something we want to do. We could shoot to have a May 2013 debut, if not before. And we also, one of the volunteers from the Historical Society, Marcia Hanford, who's on the board of the Historical Society, did us a big service. She helped transcribe an earlier Civic Center walking tour that we only had paper copies of. So now we have a digital copy of that, so we don't have to reinvent a lot of that information. And that was a big help, so we're really grateful to TGHS and to Marcia.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll look forward to that next month. Next item on the agenda is 8A, an update on the status of previous work for mid-century multifamily building context.
Okay, this is Commissioner Vidor had asked about previous work that the city had done looking at mid-century apartment buildings, and this dates back to 2004-2005 when we had an intern, Marcel Boudreau, thank you, who did a significant amount of work on developing a historic context to kind of identify what is the mid-century multifamily style, how did it develop, and then kind of give a cursory overview of what we have in the city. And this was a context done without a full survey, so it was kind of a minimal amount of survey. We're lucky because there's a lot of really good information in the document that was prepared, but it was not finalized. So it's an unfinished document, an unfinished context. The good news is that we're working currently on our community plans, and each community plan is going to have a community plan context specific to the area. So we have the North Glendale Community Plan completed, and we're starting to work on the South Glendale Plan, and I'm starting to work on the South Glendale Historic Context. So a lot of the information from Marcel's report will be brought into the context directly. So that gives me a head start, which is very nice on that kind of one section of the bigger document. And then the idea is, as these community plans are developed over the years, the contexts are going to grow organically. So we're going to backfill information into the already completed context as amendments. So when we finalize, the context section for the mid-century apartments, which will be part of a bigger discussion about multifamily residential architecture, we can then go back to North Glendale, for example, and add what we have here into North Glendale. So each of the community plan contexts is going to get better as we move forward with this process. So I think rather than go back and do a standalone update of that context, which I don't think is really necessary, considering that we're doing the full context for the city ultimately. When we combine all of these contexts for the different parts, we'll have a citywide context. And what that will help us do is identify what we know that we have, what's on the ground as the contexts are written, and then identify means to kind of know, well, which of these buildings is more important than others if we start having development pressure where we're starting to lose some, and we may have CEQA issues in terms of some being considered historic resources. So ultimately, I was pleased looking at it. There's some maps in there that will be really useful for what we're doing, and a bunch of the information is going to come directly from Marcel's work into the context that we're working on.
Did I miss you saying how many contexts there would be eventually that would make up all of Glendale? Do we know?
We haven't finalized that yet. It's likely that there will be 4 or 5, and so we're working on number 2 right now.
Where does the South Glendale community plan start on its northern border?
The 134. It's everything south of the freeway.
Oh, wow. Big area.
It is. Tell us about that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
If there's nothing else, then we'll adjourn the meeting.